He sees your life also. He's saying, he watched it. He knows what's going to happen. That's why I'm asking, no matter what the pressure is on you, you're coming to the season of joy. Do not let the devil rob you of any joy. Have peace. Good morning. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. A week to go before we celebrate Christmas. I want to thank you for everything you've done for us during the course of this year. I pray sincerely over your family, your life, and I pray that the Lord will spark joy in your heart despite any other circumstances that may be trying to cripple that joy. Beloved, I received a beautiful message from a wonderful soul a few days ago, and I'd just like to play you a little bit of what she has shared with us.
Good evening, Dr. Minesh. I've been all over the place. I'm a Belgian person. I've been here 41 years in the country, born in Congo. I'm white. Not that it matters, but anyway. I've been a Christian for 28 years. I was saved in a fire in the Eastern Cape, in a nasty fire that shook my whole life, changed my whole life. And I cannot imagine my life without God, really. I was a missionary teacher until 5 years ago. My children are missionaries. My daughter she just finished this week being a teacher in a private Christian school. We absolutely love the Word of God. I have my little church also, but I don't have enough spiritually. I need plenty more. So you give me the spiritual meat that I need. I love my church very much, but to me it's not enough. And I listened to your teachings. I got 4 pages full in my diary with all your teachings. Now I'm busy, I'm introducing all your teachings to a male friend who runs a weather station here. He asked me, Sonia, please send me all the YouTube stuff and all that, so I'm busy with that. And other ladies, friends, sending them all your teachings all over the place. It's excellent, really.
I had to cut a little bit because it was a little lengthy, but I want to thank our precious sister, Sonia, and I want to say to her, we love you and we treat you as family from this day forward. And just so that you know, a missionary and extended missionaries are benefiting from this platform. And it's not just her. I've shared with you some stuff that coming from the United States and from Jamaica. All these people that are now aligning towards our ministry and becoming part of our extended family, they are people of stature that God has been using to spread His gospel. And very potently, their spirits are growing. And in order for us to defeat the enemy in the last days, we need to give people the strength that they need to build their spirituality. And this is what we are engaged in doing. We will never know the impact we have worldwide, but we can see the evidence of the work that we do. And I say we, because you enable me to do this vital work of the Lord. So for the course of the year, those of you that have helped me financially to maintain this platform, to maintain the ministry work, I want to bless you. And I say a special prayer over everyone that does that contribution. And God's ears are not closed. He hears me and He has His hand upon you. Thank you. We're going to delve right into the word of the Lord this morning. Genesis chapter 11 introduces us to the land of Ur. And Haran died before his father Terah in his native land in Ur of the Chaldeans. Now you would have heard that Abraham came from this land of Ur of the Chaldeans. Now the name, I'm going to build this slowly for you. The name Ur in Aramaic is flame or light. That takes me to explain the next part. In Hebrew, the word seraph, you know that's a type of angel, means burning. And it is used 7 times throughout the text of the Hebrew Bible as a noun, usually to denote serpent. So a burning or lighted up serpent. So the land of Ur is synonymous with the serpentine, a burning light, or Lucifer. Let's go on. Isaiah chapter 6 verse 2 introduces us to a deeper understanding of the seraphim. Above him were seraphim, that means more than one seraph, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying. Now just as a side note, a seraph is built to have 6 wings, 2 on either side. The one that covers their face, the reason for a seraph covering his face is because on many occasions he has reason to meet with God, face to face as it were. And they are not allowed to look at God. So they use that wing to cover their faces. The other pair of wings in the bottom is used to cover their feet. And that's a symbol of respect, because feet are synonymous with being dirty. And so that's the reason for a seraph having 3 pairs of wings. Now let's go to the land of Chaldee. Chaldee was a small country that existed between the late 10th or early 9th and mid 6th centuries before Christ, after which the country and its people were absorbed and assimilated into the indigenous population of Babylonia. So the Chaldeans were part of Babylon. From 626 before Christ to 539, a ruling family referred to as the Chaldean dynasty, named after their possible Chaldean origin, ruled the kingdom at its height under the Neo-Babylonian Empire, although the final ruler of this empire, Nabonidus, and his son and regent Belshazzar. So, a few interesting things is that not only did Chaldeans, the serpentine people, who worshipped fire, as in worshipping the god serpent, and we know that god serpent as Lucifer, they assimilated themselves into the Babylonian regime. And not only that, they took over Babylon. So they were the Babylonians. Belshazzar was actually the grandson of King Nebuchadnezzar II. You remember we learnt a lot about this evil king a while earlier. This is the man that was responsible for making Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego go into the furnace. That's because they believed that fire is to be worshipped as God. And so he took the 3 boys and he pushed them as a sacrifice to their God. the serpent burning fire. So they used to worship fire, but it came from a long tradition of fire worshipping people. Now, we know this tribe exists because there is a stone that lies in a museum. The Nabonidus Chronicle records the events during the rule of the last king of Babylonia, before the Persian king Cyrus conquered the kingdom, and this stone lies in a museum. So all these things that I'm sharing with you falls directly in line with some of the events recorded on the stone, and we have it today. You know, it gives rise to the scriptures that tell us, if we don't praise God to verify in our spirits the authenticity of the history he left behind and his reality, then he will raise up these kind of stones to testify of the validity of the records that we're going through. Now, in the Bereshit, Rabbah 38, it records this story. Terah was a manufacturer of idols. Now, Terah was Abraham's father. He once went away somewhere and left Abraham to sell them in his place. A man came in and wished to buy one. And Abraham asked that man, how old are you? Man said, 50 years old. And he said, woe to that such a man who is 50 years old and who chooses to worship an idol which is only 1 day old. Now Abraham said this, on another occasion, a woman came in with a plate full of flour and requested him, take this and offer it to them. So he took a stick and he broke all the idols, and he put the stick in the hand of the largest idol. When his father returned, what have you done to them? I cannot conceal it from you, Dad. A woman came with a plate full of fine meal and requested me to offer it to them. One claimed, I must eat first, while the other claimed, I must eat first. So Abraham was sort of mocking his father, and he said, you know, this lady came with a bowl of flour, and there was a fight between the idols who wants to eat the flour. And the biggest one smashed all the other idols, and he wanted to eat. So that's why all the idols are smashed. And then Terah said something to Abraham, why do you make sport of me? In other words, why are you mocking me? Have they any knowledge to do this sort of thing? Terah said, should not your ears hear what your mouth has said? Abraham asked his father. He says, you're saying to me, Dad, that this could not have happened because they could not take the stick and bust each other up. And Abraham said, listen to what your mouth is saying. Let your ears listen. So if they can't do that, how are they serving you as a God? The story continues. Abraham said, thereupon Terah seized him and delivered him to Nimrod. So father got angry, he gave him to Nimrod. Let us worship fire, Nimrod said. Let us rather worship water which quenches fire, Abraham said. Let us worship water, Nimrod said. Let us rather worship clouds which bear the water, Abraham said. Let us then worship the clouds, Nimrod said. Let us worship the wind which disperses the clouds, Abraham said. Let us worship the wind, Nimrod said. Let us worship human beings which can stand up to the wind. Abraham said, you are just bandying words, and we will worship nothing but the fire. Behold, I will cast you into it, and let your God, whom you adore, come and save you from it. Nimrod said. So Abraham's father handed over Abraham to the ruler of the land at that time, Nimrod, to be punished for mocking their gods. And Nimrod said, I'm going to put you in the fire. Our God controls that fire. And if your God is real, let him come and save you from that fire. Next line says, now Haran, that means Abraham's brother, was standing there undecided. If Abraham is victorious, I will say that I am of Abraham's belief. While if Nimrod is victorious, I will say that I am on Nimrod's side, he thought. Now, there's a double-minded brother of Abraham. He's saying, listen, if Abraham comes out of that fire, I'll say I serve Abraham's God. But obviously if Abraham gets burnt in that fire, then I'm on Nimrod's side. So he was sitting on a fence. When Abraham descended into the fiery furnace and was saved, Nimrod asked him, of whose belief are you? And Haran said, Abraham's. Thereupon he seized him, cast him into the fire. His inwards were scorched, and he died in the presence of his father. Hence it is written, and Haran died in the presence of his father Terah. Do you remember what we read in the beginning, Genesis 11? It didn't give us the whole picture. But now we're getting the whole picture. Genesis 11 tells us, and Haran died before his father Terah in his native land in Ur of the Chaldeans. So, I just want to help you to see this. When you serve God, there must be no doubt in your mind that He is God and that He is going to take care of you when your back is against the wall. And it happens often that the devil places us in circumstances where our mind sometimes becomes doubtful and fear creeps in. And because of this doubtfulness, the devil was able to even burn Haran dead. Even though Haran said, I will believe in Abraham's God if Abraham comes out. You know, some people come for healing to the church. Some people want God to do something for them in order for them to serve Him. God works the other way around. You serve Him with no doubt, and then He will act on your behalf. I'm going to get into some other details as we go forward. But a person who is doubtful is in a very dangerous place. Because if Satan is after them, God's protection over that person is voided. And Abraham was the one who was rescued. Now you see the picture where the Chaldeans were the ones that used to burn people and offer those people to the Chaldean god. So when something is offered to a Chaldean god, it usually requires a fire kind of offering in line with the burning serpentine. So who are these people actually worshipping? A burning serpent. Now you remember the story of Molech. Molech was a god that required young children to be sacrificed by burning them alive. This is the same god that the Babylonians, and now we know it's actually the Chaldeans who were sacrificing to Satan. We're going to read some stuff from the prophecy of Abraham. The fall of man and its sequel. Now, you remember I shared with you, Abraham rose up in spirit to the seventh heaven, and the angel was escorting him around, but God opened his eyes to the events. God showed him the past in a vision, looking down on the earth. He showed him the past. He showed him the time even when Eve and Adam were in the garden, what was going on. So he showed him the past. He also showed Abraham the future while looking down onto the physical realm. But we're going to see what Abraham saw about what was happening in the Garden of Eden. Let us read. And I looked into the picture, and mine eyes ran to the side of that Garden of Eden. And I saw there a man, very great in height and fearful in breadth, incomparable in aspect, embracing a woman who likewise approximated to the aspect and shape of the man. And they were standing under a tree of the Garden of Eden, and the fruit of this tree was like the appearance of a bunch of grapes of the vine. And behind the tree was standing, as it were, a serpent in form, having hands and feet like a man's, and wings on its shoulders, 6 on the right side, 6 on the left side. So what was that? That was a seraphim. And they were holding the grapes of the tree in their hands, and both were eating it, whom I had seen embracing. So Adam and Eve, these two people in the Garden of Eden, were holding grapes in their hand. That's the forbidden fruit. Many say it was an apple, but here Abraham described like a bunch of grapes. And these two, Adam and Eve, were eating these grapes. And I said, who are these mutually embracing? Or who is this who is between them? Or what is the fruit which they are eating, O mighty eternal one? And he said, this is the human world. This is Adam. And this is their desire upon the earth. This is Eve. But he who is between them representeth ungodliness, their beginning on the way to perdition, even Azazel. So he's saying this seraphim, this burning serpent, his name is Azazel, and he's the one with them in the garden, and he's the one responsible for man's ultimate destruction, their perdition. He's the reason, the ungodliness that he promotes, Satan, is the reason for man engaging in perdition. And I said, O eternal mighty one, why hast thou given to such power to destroy the generation of men in their works upon the earth? And he said to me, they who do evil, and how much I hate it in those who do it, over them I give him power, and to be beloved of them. Hey, this is wonderful. God is saying this Azazel, this Satan, this burning seraph can only have power over the people who do ungodly things, whether they worship or bow down to him or not. But if they are ungodly, to them, he offers them to Lucifer, to Azazel. The people who do not do ungodly things, they don't fall under his control. And he said to me, being angered at the nations on thy account, and on account of the people of thy family, who are to be separated after thee, as thou seest in the picture the burden of destiny that is laid upon them, and I will tell thee what shall be, and how much shall be. Here's the words, in the last days. Look now at everything in the picture. So Abraham is being told by God, look at the picture. See these people that are going to come after you, the ones that are going to come from your loins. See what's going to happen to them. Now, this is the first time, before Isaac was even born, before Abraham was even married, he has this vision. And God tells him and shows him with his own eyes, he sees down, of the future, these last days that we are in, of what his generation, people that's going to come from his family line, from his loins, what they're going to do. Remember, Esau comes from his family line, and those family line is going to be split, Jacobites and Esaites, and they're going to come into this world in the last days. And Abraham is looking at what they're going to be doing and the destruction they are going to be causing. We just read that. Let's read it again. Account of the people of thy family who are to be separated after thee. And he says, look at the burden they cast. And the picture I'm going to show you. He says, this is what they're going to be doing. I saw their naked men, the foreheads against each other, and their disgrace. He saw homosexuality before that even became known. He says, in the last days, these are the things they're going to be doing, and I've shared enough with you. And their passion, which they had for each other. It says against, but for each other. And their retribution. I saw their desire. And in a hand, the head of every kind of lawlessness, and a scorn and a waste assigned to perdition. I saw there the likeness of the idol of jealousy, having the likeness of woodwork, such as my father was wont to make, and its statue was of glittering bronze. You remember what Molech looked like? And before it a man, and he worshipped it, and in front of him an altar, and upon it a boy slain in the presence of the idol. Wow. Abraham saw what these Chaldeans, the Babylonians, are going to offer to the little boys, are going to be offered as burning sacrifices. And who's going to do this? From his family line. Well, it wasn't from his family line at that time, but his family line came after. In the last days, they're going to be doing what the Chaldeans were doing. You know, the next thing, Abraham had an occasion to speak with God. So he said, let me ask him. He says, why is sin allowed to be committed? And I said, O mighty one, wherefore hast thou established that it should be so? And then proclaim the knowledge thereof. Abraham is saying, Lord, but you know this is going to happen. Why did you even allow sin to even happen in the first place? And he said to me, hear, Abraham, understand what I say to thee, and answer me as I question thee. Why did thy father Terah not listen to thy voice? And why did he not cease from the devilish idolatry until he perished, and his whole household with him? And I said, O eternal mighty one, it was entirely because he did not choose to listen to me. But I too did not follow his works. And he said to me, hear, Abraham, as the counsel of thy father is with him, and as thy counsel is in thee, so also is the counsel of my will in me, ready for the coming days. Before thou hast knowledge of these, or canst see with thine eyes what is future in them, how those of thy seed will look in the picture. So let me tell you this, in case there's thoughts going on in your mind. You know, when I preach this gospel to you, when I share truth with you, every person, God told Abraham this. He says every person's counsel is within himself. So every person must make his or her own choices. And depending on their choices, God says even I have to make my own choice. This is how I made man with free will. That's why you can't force anybody to hear what you're saying. You can't convince anybody. They must choose. And depending on the choice they make, will depend whether they go to with Satan or they are saved. So all we can do, you and I, is to spread the good news of Jesus Christ. Leave the seeds scattered. And thank you for helping me to do that. Even with your friends, leave the seeds scattered. And those who choose to listen, praise God, they will be saved. Because every person has free will. I'm going to introduce you to another relic of old. It lies at the moment in the Louvre Art Gallery. It's called the Misha stone. The Misha stone, also known as the Moabite stone, is a stele dated around 840 BC, before Christ, containing a significant Canaanite inscription in the name of King Misha of Moab. a king located in modern-day Jordan. Misha tells how Chemosh, the god of Moab, had been angry with his people and had allowed them to be subjugated to the kingdom of Israel. But at length, Chemosh returned and assisted Misha to throw off the yoke of Israel and restore the lands of Moab. This is another stone that is raised up to praise God. This is written so many hundreds of years ago. And it's actually thousands now. 800, that's the age of the stone. And they inscribed there the happenings during the time I'm talking about. So we dealt with the Moabite tribe. Now let's deal with the Ammonite tribe. Ammon was an ancient Semitic speaking nation occupying the east of the Jordan River. The chief city of the country was Rabbah or Rabat Ammon, site of the modern day Amman, Jordan's capital. Milcom and Molech are named in the Hebrew Bible as the gods of Ammon. Now, here you see where the Chaldeans, or what they have adopted into their culture. They adopted the god Molech, the sacrifice of children, burning things, burning seraphs. So, these two people, Moab and Ammon, were all part of the makeup of Canaanites. And Babylon was the precursor to their existence. Archaeology and history indicate that Ammon flourished during the period of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. This was the period that Nebuchadnezzar II was king. Now there's a king called Eglon. He was the head of the confederacy of Moab, Ammon, and Amalek in the assault on Israel. So these tribes, which was part of the land of Canaan now, they were the ones that really attacked Israel. Now, Amalek was one of the grandsons of Esau. You remember the other grandson we spoke of was Zepho. This is the other grandson that didn't travel to Egypt and to Greece. This son remained in the land of Canaan, Amalek. And he became a thorn in the side of Israel. When you go through the Old Testament and other ancient scriptures, you see these tribes, the Ammonites, the Moabites, and the Amalekites, they killed many Israelites, and they were preventing Israel from taking over the land of Canaan as God promised Abraham. Even one of Abraham's descendants now, Esau, came from his family line. They were part and parcel of the people who were worshipping Molech. We go back to a section called his descendants. According to a legend in the Midrash, this is about Eglon the king. The two Moabite women from the book of Ruth, Orpah and Ruth, were sisters, and both were daughters of the Moabite king Eglon. I want you to see how the ancient cultures, these people we even read about in the Bible, they were Moabite women. Genesis chapter 14. Then they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their provisions and went their way. They also took Lot, Abraham's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. Now when Abraham heard that his brother was taken captive, that's actually his nephew, he armed his 318 trained servants who were born in his house and went in pursuit as far as Dan. He divided his forces against them by night, and he and his servants attacked them and pursued them as far as Hobah, which is north of Damascus. So he brought back all the goods, and he also brought back his brother Lot and his goods, as well as the women and the people. So I'm skipping here because I want to introduce you to who Abraham was. When Abraham was leaving the nation where he grew up, the land of Ur, he was convinced to take Lot along, his brother's son, because his brother was burnt now in the fire. So Lot was stranded. And so Abraham adopted Lot and brought him along. And so he regarded him as family, obviously. And he was protective over Lot. And Lot went and settled, as you know, in Sodom and Gomorrah, in the city of Sodom. And God had a plan to destroy the city. And before that happened, these kings, they came from the foreign land, they came and captured the people from Sodom, and they took Lot. So Abraham gathered a group of his men, 300, and he went in pursuit of these captors. And he destroyed those captors, and he brought back Lot. So Lot and his whole family came back because Abraham rescued them. Now let's read the second intervention. Abraham intercedes for Sodom. Then the men rose from there and looked toward Sodom. That's the angels that came to visit Abraham. And Abraham went with them to send them on their way. And the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham what I am doing? Then the men turned away from there and went toward Sodom. But Abraham stood before the Lord. And Abraham came near and said, would you also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there were 50 righteous within the city. And so there was a conversation between Abraham and the two angels. And if the Lord is going to destroy, what if we had 50 people? What if we have 10 people, 20 people? What if we have 10 people? Then the angel said, okay. God says it's okay. If there's 10 people, we'll save them. And so that's when they went in, because who Abraham was actually trying to protect in that city? He was trying to protect Lot. And the angel listened to him, or God listened to him. And you know the story, they went in, and eventually they saved Lot and his 2 daughters, and his wife turned around and she turned into a pillar of salt. And we know how that happened, because I taught you that earlier on. It was not, it's a physical or a physics reality that volcanoes produce salt pillars, and that's what came and sprung up from the land and burnt that whole city. So these 2 daughters and Lot, they got saved from the burning sulfur, and they ran away into the mountains. So we see on 2 occasions that God or Abraham interceded on behalf of Lot. Once he took his men and he went and fought for Lot and saved him. The second time, he asked God to spare Lot. So God tried to get rid of Lot twice. Both occasions, Abraham stood in the gap. And the reason I'm telling you this is because those 2 tribes, Moab and Ammon, they were from Lot. Because these 2 daughters, when they got saved from the fire, they went with Lot, and they couldn't find a man to fall pregnant, and they said, oh, our father is going to die, we're going to die, we need to have children. So they made the father drunk, they had relations with him, and one of them had a son, they called him Ammon, the other one had another son, called him Moab. So from those 2 tribes sons came the Moabites and the Ammonites, the ones we discussed, the ones who started to worship the Chaldean god, the burning serpent, the Molech god, to offer sacrifice to those gods. You remember we read just now, the vision that God showed Abraham was to see a man standing in front of this bronze statue offering a child. We just read that before. You remember I told you that these elites gather, and I showed you a video secretly recorded where they gathered to honor this god Molech in the redwoods of California. They do the same thing that the Chaldeans did. And who are these people? These peoples are descendants from Abraham, the fake Jews, the ones, Esau's children, the Edomites. And so they are the ones that are doing it. And what did Abraham see? Abraham saw in the last days how these people came from the line of Abraham are going to offer children as sacrifices or people as burnt offerings to the god Molech. What is the moral of this issue? Besides pointing to the fact that these stones that we saw in the museums just now, they attest to the reality of things that have happened during the Moabite era, during the Ammonite era, and during Belshazzar and Nebuchadnezzar's era. We see that it's reality. And when Abraham went up, God actually showed him these things. But the moral of everything is this: God tried to make life easy for Abraham. Because if the Ammonites were not an obstacle to Israel when they were coming from Egypt, if the Moabites were not an obstacle, Israel would have had an easy time. They wouldn't have even been captured by the same group of people who came and took them out into exile from Babylon. You know the stories. They came and took them, captured them, put them in those places, and that's where we get the story of Daniel going in the lion's den. Those 3 Hebrew boys, because they were captured. And who captured them? The children of Ammon and Moab, who were from the land of the ancient Chaldeans, who were Babylonians. But it only happened because Abraham chose. Listen, this is his choice. God told him everything you do is a choice. Abraham chose to intercede on behalf of his nephew Lot. If he left Lot alone for God to let God do what God does, then Israel would have had a much better run. These same tribes from Ammon, from Moab, is from where these, and Edomites, the Amalekites, they came into Jerusalem when Jerusalem was rebuilt. And they're the ones during the time of Jesus, Judas and Caiaphas the high priest. They were from this family line. They were fake Jews who took posts in the temple and pretended to be real Jews. They're the ones that orchestrated, and God used the filth inside of them to carry out his plan to kill Jesus. Because if it wasn't for their nature, Jesus may not have been put on the cross. And thank God, their evil nature persisted. But it brings me to help you listen that sometimes things might look bad. When Lot got captured, oh, it must have broken Abraham inside. And he got so upset and so concerned, and what he gathered all his men together and he said, no, we got to go find these people. I bring my nephew back. See, it's painful to witness certain things go wrong. Maybe your car got stolen. Maybe your business was... We don't know, as long as you are in God, like Abraham was. Leave God to be God. We don't know why certain things happen. But we do know that if we are in God, no weapon formed against us can prosper. The devil cannot raise up any standard against us. So our prayer must always be, let thy will be done. Even if you think you know better, leave it to God. You know, I lost 2 jobs, good jobs. It wasn't even my fault. At that time, my heart was broken. Lord, I need to take care of my mom and my family. But God was setting the platform for me to stand by this pulpit today, some 30 years later, to help you have a deeper relationship with God. So whatever God is doing in your life, it might look terrible. You don't force an issue. If one girl leaves you, let it go. If God is in this thing with you, nothing that belongs to you will run away. If it's meant for you to have that business, it will work. If you love God, that is. If you honor God with everything that you are, He will make sure that every plan of His in your life comes to pass. You cannot see the full picture. Abraham was looking down and seeing that God already knows the present, He knows the past, He knows the future. He even showed Abraham what's going to happen in our day. I mean, that was 2,500 years ago. I mean, more than 3,000 years ago. 3,500 in fact. He was talking to Abraham and telling him what is going to happen today, while you and I standing here today in the last days. So don't be moved by any changes happening in your life. It means if you love God, if you are His, if God is your everything, and you worship Him truly in your spirit, any changes that are taking place, let it happen. Because God is in control always. He hasn't left the throne. Now I want to take you to the reality of the prophecy. And I've been showing you clips, and I want to show you the latest clip that one of our members, you know, they're very astute. All our followers, all our members are very astute. One of them sent me this clip.
That looks great, thank you. What you want in a pancake is to have the consistency of young human flesh.
It's spongy, it has life to it.
You're with a guy with brightly colored undergarments, and you got soft human flesh in front of you. You're in a weird place.
I'm looking forward to this. This is really, really going to be a great pancake.
If you'd rather have your cannibalism bragging served up as a song than as a joke, check out Katy Perry's music video for Bon Appetit, which sees Katy being unpackaged, prepared like a meal, and then served to a table of some elite guests. The last scene of the video is of Katy herself throwing off a devilish grin as she prepares to dig into a cherry pie with severed human limbs. If you're still craving more upper-class cannibalism, just turn on your TV and flip channels to FX, and you'll have the 5th season of American Horror Story. What's it all about? Oh, nothing. Just Lady Gaga being a vampire who needs to drink the blood of young children in order to stay alive. And that's not the only show that has this exact plot line. Netflix's Santa Clarita Diet is about pretty much the same thing. And speaking of Netflix, that company is just about Illuminati Central. 3 of their shows are all about satanic cults: The Order, Aries, and Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which also features cannibalism. And Netflix just loves the one-eye symbol. Loves it. Hell, I just snapped this from their recent Chris Hemsworth action movie Extraction. It's about time someone really talks about the elephant in the room here. Disney is a company that's entrenched up to its eyeballs in pedophilia. Former child stars Ricky Garcia, Jordan Pruitt, and Bella Thorne have all leveled sex abuse allegations against Disney. And let's not forget, ex-Vice President Michael Laney was convicted of child abuse last year. So was Disney's music publishing director John Healy. And there have been a lot of Disney employees busted for child porn. And then there was the case of child molestation on Disney cruises, of which employees were ordered to keep quiet about. And guess where those cruises made snorkeling stops? Little St. James Island, the luxurious private island of this guy, who most certainly did not kill himself. Speaking of Epstein, Disney chairman Richard Cook was among his Lolita Express flight passengers. Disney also has quite the affinity for the boy lover symbol, which appears on the Blue Lion character from Disney Junior's Elaine F. Avalor on this CD for the Jungle Book and as part of the It's a Small World ride at Disneyland. Now, just how long has Disney had pedophilia lurking within its walls? Well, that started with Walt himself. In a 1975 book called Hollywood Babylon 2, filmmaker Kenneth Anger wrote a section about Disney's infatuation with a child actor named Bobby Driscoll. Studio personnel have been quoted to the effect that Bobby's charm had worked wonders on grumpy old Disney. Some animators stated that the boss seemed to have fallen in love with the boy. There may be truth in this. Well, that would certainly explain Driscoll becoming a junkie in his teens and eventually dying an early death. After all, child actors that suffered sexual abuse tend to leer into the path of drug addiction, as with Corey Haim among others. Another interesting piece of trivia about Walt Disney is that he was a Freemason. In 1920, Disney joined De Mole International, a fraternal organization that is considered part of the family of Masons. 11 years later, Walt received the De Mole Legion of Honor Award, corresponding to the 33rd degree of Freemasonry. Indeed, at the original Disneyland park, Walt set up an exclusive members-only club called Club 33. This is the interior. No further explanation needed. So now that you know that the founder of Disney belonged to an esoteric secret society, it should therefore come as no surprise that the company's products are laced with the usual symbols. The movie National Treasure is all about secret societies and the all-seeing eye. This pic from the DuckTales movie Treasure of the Lost Lamp shows the little ducklings eagerly digging up the eye in the pyramid. There's also Disney Channel's Alex Hirsch, who has a clear fondness of the one-eye pyramid and Satanism. Happy Father's Day to the ultimate father, the father of darkness, Satan. Why is somebody who works in children's TV tweeting that? So now you see that Disney is thoroughly invested in the occult. After all, most of their movies have to do with magic, witchcraft, and sorcery.
Child sacrifice, human sacrifice, all these things that the Chaldeans were doing to honor the burning fiery serpent. That is going on today. There's a lady that was giving a long speech. Her name is Whitney Webb. I'll play you some parts of the video, but it's quite lengthy. But I want to give you a synopsis. I'm going to paint a nice picture of the web that is woven in the world and how everything knits together. Just follow with me.
First up today we have special guest, Whitney Webb. She is a writer, researcher, investigative journalist, and an expert on the Jeffrey Epstein case. Her new book about Epstein case is called One Nation Under Blackmail. There's the first one. There's volume 2, One Nation Under Blackmail. That's where she focuses on Jeffrey Epstein. She also writes for a number of different publications, but you can catch her at her own site, unlimitedhangout.com. Please welcome Whitney Webb. Hi, Whitney.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me back on. So
I'm reading unfortunately, I didn't get an advance copy of the book, so I'm going to be just like anybody else in the audience tonight. Like, hey, I'm going to ask questions. And, but the description of the book is something I want to read it for people. It says, One Nation Under Blackmail is a damning indictment of the consequences resulting from the nearly century-old relationship between both U.S. and Israeli intelligence and the organized crime network known as the National Crime Syndicate. Can you is that real? There's a thing called the National Crime Syndicate? This seems like a cartoon.
Yeah, well, no, it is real. So it was a decentralized network of different organized crime groups operating in the United States in the early 20th century. So historically, organized crime in the U.S., most people are probably familiar with it because of Hollywood and whatnot, tend to sort of be an ethnic enclave. So you'd have Irish organized crime, the Jewish mob, the Italian mafia, and so on. So the National Crime Syndicate sort of broke down those silos and brought these different groups together, and that made them a lot more successful.
But that was their name, the National Crime Syndicate?
Yes, yes.
And they didn't have any qualms about. So this is in documents that they were referred to as this?
Yeah. It's definitely not something I made up. That's for sure. So this was basically an outgrowth of something called Murder Inc. and some other things. The main people behind it were Meyer Lansky, I guess representing the Jewish mob there, and then Lucky Luciano of the Italian mafia. And so they basically came together, and in World War II, they formally teamed up with the Office of Naval Intelligence and the Office of Strategic Services, or the OSS, which is the precursor to the CIA. And this was justified as necessary because it was the war, right? So a wartime necessity justification. But then the war ends, and then, the intelligence apparatus of the U.S. and these mob guys realize they have a lot in common and they work really well together. And so that's why in the 60s, in the 50s, you see a lot of the people involved in assassination stuff for the CIA after it was made. You see a lot of mob guys around, for example. And there's a lot of other examples of them, interacting on and off, over the years that maybe more people are familiar with. But, a lot of this it involved like the realm of shadow banking finance. It expanded into the world of corporate power as well, and ended up just really becoming out of control. And also, you have, like you mentioned earlier, Israeli intelligence sort of get involved in this developing power nexus as well, because the Jewish mob side of the National Crime Syndicate was heavily involved in the arming of the Haganah, and the precursor to the IDF and all of this. So basically, by the time the State of Israel is created, these alliances are, part of its national security state from the off.
Now I'm going to introduce you to a term called the National Crime Syndicate. It was a name given by the press to the multi-ethnic, loosely connected American confederation of several criminal organizations. It mostly consisted of and was led by the closely interconnected Italian-American mafia and the Jewish mob, and to a lesser extent it also involved other criminal organizations such as the Irish mob and the African-American organized crime groups. Hundreds of murders were committed by what they called Murder Inc. on behalf of the National Crime Syndicate during the 1930s and 1940s. So this was an organization formed between the heads of all the organized crime bosses, and one of them was the Jewish mob. The Italian mafia was part of it. And remember, the Italians are the grandsons of Zeppo, the great-grandchildren of Zeppo, who is a grandson of Esau. Same family tribe. There's another term I want to introduce you to. It's called Operation Underworld. It was the United States government's code name for the cooperation of Italian and Jewish organized crime figures from 1942 to 1945. So what the American government did, they said, listen, we're going to bring the National Crime Syndicate, all these mob bosses, under our control, and we're going to have a government organization, and it's going to be called Operation Underworld. The OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, was the intelligence agency of the United States during World War II. The OSS was formed as an agency of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to coordinate espionage activities behind enemy lines for all the branches of the United States Armed Forces. Other OSS functions, including the use of propaganda, that means false reporting of news, misleading news, subversion, that means distorting the truth or oppressing the truth, and post-war planning. We know how much the truth was oppressed in recent years. The OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, was dissolved a month after the end of the war. Intelligence tasks were shortly later resumed and carried over its successors, the Department of State Bureau of Intelligence and Research, INR, and the Independent Central Intelligence Agency. So what is the Central Intelligence Agency if we look back now? It is the government's OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, combined with the organized crime mob bosses, and this is a criminal entity that carried out murders. They joined in with the American government and they were called the CIA. Now there are rumors, more than just rumors, that there's documented evidence that's being covered up, that JFK, John F. Kennedy, the president, was assassinated, coordinated by the same crime unit involving the Jewish mob, which are now part of the CIA. There's an article tells us, JFK assassination investigator has jarring new claim about Oswald's CIA involvement. So Lee Harvey Oswald, the man that killed John F. Kennedy and shot him dead, famous video footage, he was part of an operation by the CIA. The article tells us the CIA holds documents that show presidential assassin Lee Harvey Oswald was involved in an intelligence operation before the assassination. Morley claimed that the CIA operation involving Oswald took place in the summer of 1963, 3 months before the assassination. So they were CIA was working with this Oswald, and they were training him to be part of this operation to get rid of John F. Kennedy. Now, this Oswald family was the third cousin of President Theodore Roosevelt and a distant cousin of General Robert E. Lee. Both these men, Roosevelt and Lee, were both Freemasons. Now, to clean up the operation, where Lee Harvey offered himself as a sacrificial lamb, I don't know whether he didn't know it. But after they arrested him and they put him in jail, it so happens that a man named Jack Ruby goes up to him and shoots him point blank dead. Obviously, to shut him up. Now, this man that shot him dead, his name is Jack Leon Rubenstein, Jew, was an American nightclub owner and alleged associate of the Chicago outfit, this is the mob who murdered Oswald on 24th of November 63. 2 days after Oswald was accused of the assassination of Kennedy. Various critics who suggest that Ruby was involved with major figures in organized crime and that he was acting as part of an overall plot surrounding the assassination of Kennedy. Here's a speech that got Kennedy assassinated.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people. For I have complete confidence in the response and dedication of our citizens whenever they are fully informed. I not only could not stifle controversy among your readers, I welcome it. This administration intends to be candid about its errors. For as a wise man once said, an error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it.
The report is that the president is dead. The word we have is that he is dead, that he was shot by an assassin at the intersection of Elm and Houston Streets just as he was going into the underpass. The word we have is from a doctor on the staff of Parkland Hospital who says that it is true. He was in tears when he told me just a moment ago.
So he said he's not going to tolerate any secret societies and any subversion and all these things. And that is what got the man killed. He was no longer going to fall in line with their plan, no longer part of the cabal. He was not doing what they expect him to do, and they tried to blackmail him. They brought a prostitute from Britain who was accused of bringing down ministers there. And the rumors are they brought her here to trap him, and they couldn't trap him. So the next resort was to kill him. They brought a Chinese woman. The article tells John F. Kennedy was investigated by the FBI over an alleged affair with a Chinese prostitute linked to Britain's best-known call girl, Christine Keeler, a liaison which the Bureau believed could have exposed the president to a suspected communist spying. This lady, Whitney Webb, tells us more details. I just want you to have a look, cut in pieces, and watch this entire piece.
So it seems like they would try to get this blackmail stuff on powerful people, and then they could get them to do their biddings. But did it work with Kennedy? It seems like it didn't work.
No, it didn't really work there because it was exposed to an extent, the operation, and traced back to British intelligence. So there was a very sloppy cover-up where Mariella Novotny, who was the name of the girl, was how she was allowed to flee the country with the apparent help of U.S. intelligence, because at that time there was a very cozy relationship, I guess you could say, and there arguably still is, between U.S. and British intelligence, right?
This lady has written 2 books. Very powerful, very informative, very in-depth. And just so that you know, the first part, she's trying to tell us that the plot to blackmail him failed.
One of the things that really surprised me when writing this book is how sexual blackmail pops up over and over again in various big events and scandals in U.S. history. And so part of what I'm trying to show, and a big reason why I wrote Volume 1, is to really break apart the mainstream media narrative that Jeffrey Epstein was an anomaly, that his behavior was exclusive to him, and now he's dead, so none of this stuff it doesn't matter anymore. This is a type of activity that has been done over and over and over again in our political system, and it was it was a move, and it's a type of operation really that was perfected first by the mob.
This was a common technique was used by the mob, the Jewish mob, the organized crime unit, which now is incorporated into the CIA. These people even took over the Democratic Party in New York from those days after the World War II.
This is more from the description of the book. It says this book specifically explores how the nexus between intelligence and organized crime directly developed the sexual blackmail tactics and networks that would later enable the sexual blackmail operation and other crimes of deceased pedophile and sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. Other books on Jeffrey Epstein focus on the depraved nature of his crimes or his wealth and his most famous politically connected friends and acquaintances, but this book, in contrast, reveals the extent to which Epstein's activities were state-sponsored through an exploration of his intelligence connection. So tell me about, so when the Pizzagate thing happened, right, when Pizzagate broke, that story, I didn't pay much attention to it, but what did catch my eye was what I thought was an overreaction to a bunch of people online saying that there was a sexual pedophile ring in Washington, D.C. And I'm like, well, first of all, that sounds completely reasonable. To assume that there's a sex pedophile ring servicing powerful people in Washington, D.C. That's not crazy to think that could happen. That they overreacted to that. Just like Seth Rich, if you even mentioned it, you were banished from society. You couldn't ask questions about it. You couldn't cover it. You couldn't do anything. And I was just like, what is going on? Why are they overreacting to this Pizzagate thing so much? Why do they have to? Why is that? And then, you find out it's because there actually is a pedophile ring happening, and it's sponsored by the intelligence community, and it involves a bunch of really powerful people, like part of the royal family and Bill Clinton and people and Hollywood stars and people like that go to Jeffrey Epstein's island and have sex with kids. And this, we know this for a fact, and there's a flight log. And so I guess that was, just like with people were speculating that it started from a, and they immediately have to overreact to that and say you're a racist if you think that, right? So that was, that's again, your flag, my detector went off. You guys are overreacting too hard to that. And so this is just, so what you are saying is that Jeffrey Epstein isn't a one-off. This isn't some anomaly inside of our culture. No. This is a regular classic CIA psyop, or it's classic CIA program to do this. This is how they get powerful people under the CIA's control to do their bidding.
And the last thing we hear is that Jeffrey Epstein was not an anomaly. This Jewish man was working as part of the mob trick, the MO they use. He was used to bring women from wherever, move them around, children. He was used to blackmail politicians, important leaders, tape them, and then use that against them so that they can now control them. They did that to Edgar Hoover, the longest serving FBI director. He was photographed having relations with his male aide. The man never married. And they used that photograph to blackmail him. In fact, in his entire 40-year career as the FBI director, he never once went after any organized crime. In fact, there was something called a Page scandal in 1983. Page boys, people that serve in the House of Congress, they assist all the senators and the congressmen to carry out their duties. This Page boy was abused. There's stories that went out and it made the news, and one of the senators was, or two of them were reprimanded by the House for what they have done against these minors. They were having relations with 17-year-old minors. The man, one of the men that did it, just got reprimanded and he went back into the Congress. In 1988, authorities looked into baseless allegations that prominent citizens of Nebraska as well as high-level US politicians were involved in child prostitution ring. Alleged abuse victims were interviewed who claimed that children in foster care were flown to the east coast of the United States to be sexually abused at bad parties. The claims primarily centered on Lawrence E. King Jr., who ran the now defunct Franklin Community Federal Credit Union in Omaha, Nebraska, and alleged that the ring was a cult of devil worshippers involved in mutilation, sacrifice, and cannibalism of numerous children. Now, they took the story and they threw it under the carpet, and one of the CIA appointed members of the Justice Department refused to prosecute or even look into it. They said it's a lie. I want you to see how the Babylonian from the land of Ur have come down just like Abraham saw in that vision. And they're doing exactly what Molech wants. The reason I'm telling you this is because I'm showing you the details of the web. Abraham would not have known. History books would not have known from which exact tribe these people will come and exactly what they will be doing. There's a story that's written, the MI5, this is similar now to what's happening in America. The British people are just as bad. MI5 spies can kill without fear. That's a rule that just got passed of prosecution if they can prove public interest. And the High Court rules, they can go about willy-nilly killing anybody and if they give a good excuse for it. Now we come back to Jeffrey Epstein, the poor guy, calling him poor guy. He actually got murdered in jail because they needed to keep him quiet. The article tells us that was dating a glamorous blonde Norwegian heiress at the time he was with Ghislaine Maxwell. That's his girlfriend, according to the socialite's former assistant. At the time, Selina Middelfart, 48, who had also dated Donald Trump, was heir to her family's cosmetics fortune, and flight logs show that she took at least 13 trips to Epstein's private jet. Now, what is this telling us? I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm just showing you the picture. This Jeffrey Epstein man was a neighbor of Donald Trump, and he arranged for models to be part of this ring of blackmail. And he introduced Donald Trump's first girlfriend, Middelfart, after he was divorced or divorcing from his first wife. And he introduced Melania, she was a model, to this man. So these guys were thick as thieves. And so I want you to see the picture where the presidency is concerned. These things are not, they don't just happen in a vacuum. These things are orchestrated. And there's people behind the scenes that are involved in everything that's happening. And the more you know, the more your eyes are opened, the stronger your connection becomes with God when you see the vileness on the earth. So it wasn't just Bill Clinton now. It was the president after that. And God knows how many others. So Jeffrey was very much part of the Jewish mob / all the other mobs, organized crime / CIA operations. To set up presidents, to dethrone presidents. To set up operations where, so that's why when they put certain people and you look at them and they talk absolute nonsense on your politicians when you're watching them, and you wonder how can they make such statements? It's because they are either blackmailed or they're part of the clan. Now, you know where Jeffrey learned this from a Saudi businessman. At the time, he was one of the richest men in the world, Adnan Khashoggi. Now, he was involved in weapons smuggling. He had a huge boat. That boat he eventually sold to Donald Trump. Donald Trump changed the name of the boat. So, this boat was used by Jeffrey Epstein to bring girls, to bring politicians. So, Adnan had control. That's how he became so rich. Now, one of Adnan's nephews was Dodi Fayed. You know who that is? That was Lady Diana Spencer's, or Lady Diana's boyfriends. The man who was killed in the car with her when she was killed. Look at the web of interconnectedness between the royal family, between the American presidency, between this rich Saudi businessman on a boat. I want you to see the web and how it is woven. And all these people, they do one thing: pray to the god of Molech. And they're all descendants from Abraham. Abraham's illegitimate son from Hagar gave birth to all the Muslim people. Abraham's family line was Esau. And all this filth, and God said, look at the picture, Abraham. I'm showing you when he was there. I'm showing you, look at what you can see there. And see how it's going to materialize. So beloved, God, like how today is real, God knew it 3,000 years ago. He showed Abraham. He sees your life also. He's saying, he watched it. He knows what's going to happen. That's why I'm asking, no matter what the pressure is on you, you're coming to the season of joy. Do not let the devil rob you of any joy. Have peace. Don't try and pray to move God's hand. Listen, Christmas morning's message is going to blow your mind. Make sure you listen. But I've given you all of these things so that you wake up to the reality that what you see in the world is not what is behind the scenes. What they push as government law, there's reasons behind it. Nothing is as you see it. That's why you cannot trust the people that make decisions. You got to trust in Dad. He has you in his hand. I want to pray with you. Let's pray together. Just stretch forth your hands. I know some of you might be going through things and you're fretting about it. And I want God to be still your heart. As you heard my sermon this morning and listened to all the others, know that God has you in His hand. Let us pray. Father, in Jesus' name, I know, Lord, some children are hurting. Some have worries. Some are struggling with issues. But Lord, whatever the case is, I know you have them. All you require from them is to love you. And so, Lord, I put in their hearts the desire, the hunger to love you, to worship, to honor you. In whichever way they can, to be thankful, even when things are not going well. Bless them. Give them victory over every circumstance. During this period, keep them safe. Cover them with your blood, Lord. Make provision. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, wonderful people. Have a beautiful day. Have a beautiful week. I'll see you again on Christmas morning. God bless you.